Hello, everyone. My name is Tran Nguyen. I'm a politics and government reporter for San Jose Spotlight. Welcome to our next San Jose Speaks conversation. This time we have Dr. Marianne Dewan, County Superintendent of Schools for Santa Clara County. If you have any questions for Dr. Dewan, please type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll get to them during the Q&A portion at the end of the discussion. A little bit introduction for Dr. Dewan. Dr. Dewan is the Santa Clara County Superintendent of Schools. She has served in education over 34 years in a variety of leadership roles. Dr. Dewan believes that all students deserve high quality, equitable, and inclusive education. She serves on many committees and boards and promotes equity-focused system change at local, county, and state levels. Dr. Dewan is recognized for her work in education reform and change leadership, and for her commitment to serve the community and our most vulnerable youth. She is passionate about diversity, inclusion, equity, and social justice. In addition, Dr. Dewan also writes a monthly education column for San Jose Spotlight, would publish every third Monday of the month on our website. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Dewan. How are you? Of
Thank you. I am doing well today. Thanks for having me.
course. So let's dive right into our first questions. Um, So this has been a very tumultuous time for students and teachers in Santa Clara County and across our nation. How are things going this school year?
Well, I think you're right. The last 18 plus months or so have been very tumultuous and challenging for students and teachers, as you mentioned, and also for families and all school personnel.
Yeah.
Many pandemic related challenges required immediate responses while also trying to keep students really engaged and actively learning. And school personnel continued to serve students and families in the best way that we knew how, and learning to uh, i- implement lots of new protocols as we were beginning to understand what COVID-19 might mean for our community. Many essential services that are a part of schools did continue throughout the pandemic, such as access to meals and books, lots of digital resources and hands-on learning supplies, and more. And it required a lot of participation of partners in order to provide the critical health resources that have gotten us to this place where we are in the pandemic now. And as we started this school year back to full in-person instruction. Um, Generally, the school year is going well. It's been really rewarding to see children back on school campuses. Many returned last spring as well, but to see more full classrooms and lots of students engaging with their peers and with their teachers and really thriving on school campuses. Um, we know a lot more this year about the spread of COVID-19 and its prevention, and we're seeing that play out in our school campuses with universal mask wearing, excellent ventilation in our schools, very high vaccination rates amongst our school personnel and in our community. And the partnerships that we had and the strength and knowledge that we've gained have really set us up to be as successful as possible for this school year. The Delta variant has led us to intensify a lot of our efforts, especially at wearing face coverings in the school setting, limiting visitors at schools, and reminding students and staff to stay home if they're not feeling well. We're also learning to implement a lot of things on school campuses in a more sophisticated way than we had to do last spring, such as engaging in contact tracing when there's a positive case, and also having robust testing in place for COVID-19 as part of what the community offers, but also as part of what schools are offering.
Yeah, definitely. Just from my reporting experience, there's been a lot of work has been done to get students back to classroom. So, um, you know, I reported earlier this month that among the the three largest school districts in San Jose, there were only 120 COVID-19 cases reported. What do you attribute these low case counts to?
I think there are a number of things that are leading to the low case counts. And I would also just offer that what we're learning about some of the positive cases we're seeing on campuses is that the contract of that case or the spread of the cases is really not happening at school campuses to any large degree. It's largely happening outside of school and events and things that you might imagine with parties or athletics or other activities. So I think what we're seeing is that this layered approach to risk mitigation is having the intended effect. Good ventilation, high vaccination rates, universal masking, frequent hand washing, and pretty strict adherence to our safety protocols. There's also been a significant amount of training that our school personnel have been engaged with throughout the pandemic, but even more intensely last spring over the course of the summer and at the start of the school year. So one of the things that I feel it's important to emphasize is that with Santa Clara County having vaccination rates community-wide around 83% or more, that is providing a bit of a buffer for our younger children who cannot yet be vaccinated. So I think it's a really important consideration when we're thinking about why disease transmission might still be low on campuses. It's a combination of the high vaccination rates community-wide and the very strict adherence to safety protocols and risk mitigation happening on school campuses.
Definitely. And speaking of vaccination, do you, as superintendent of schools in the county, do you support a vaccine mandate in schools? And do you feel like local school districts are doing enough to keep students, teachers, and even their families safe?
I think our school districts and our school personnel are doing just a heroic job. They've taken on and had to learn a lot of new skills and implement a lot of new procedures and protocols that they've never had to do before, including, as I mentioned, having robust testing systems in place or building the infrastructure to have COVID-19 testing available as needed. I think our big emphasis is to have continuity of learning, and so we're really trying to reduce the number of students who may need to isolate or quarantine. And really, that is the primary objective. We want to stop disease transmission, and we want to do everything we can to allow for children to participate in a very continual way with their return to in-person instruction. Whenever there's a positive case, whenever there are uh, close contacts of a positive case, that leads to the need for isolation or quarantine, which could be disruptive to our children's learning. So schools are doing everything they can. I think some areas where we're continuing to invest is building out more testing infrastructure on school campuses. We're also anxiously awaiting the eligibility of 5 to 11-year-olds so they can be eligible for COVID-19 vaccine. And we have plans to offer vaccine clinics at school sites so that we can very rapidly vaccinate all the young people. Really encouraging parents to take seriously the opportunity to have their children vaccinated, as we've seen so far that it is making a very big difference in our ability to manage COVID-19.
Right, but do you support a vaccine mandate in schools at this point?
I don't know if a mandate is necessary. I think what we're seeing, at least in our county, is very high rates of vaccination. And a lot of parents are asking us and very eager to see. So I think that we've seen historically that some immunizations have been required. I think that we might see a point in which mandates may be necessary, but at this point, we are enjoying very high vaccination rates.
Gotcha. Um, so I have read through, the quarantine and the isolation model at our county. Um, and some of the school districts that I talked to, they have expressed concern of, of staff shortages because of these guidance. Is this a big issue in Santa Clara right now? And do we have any plans to address this?
Well, we are continuing to prioritize what is in the best interest of the health and safety of staff, students, and families. And what that sometimes means is that when we're having the strict adherence to these safety protocols, we're encouraging children and staff to stay home when they're not feeling well. In addition, when there are close contacts or a positive case, that will also be disruptive and mean that staff may not be able to report to work. And then add on top of that, that yes, even before the pandemic, there were very serious staff shortages in our schools. Um, and sometimes those are teachers, they could be in lots of other fields. So staff shortages are a major concern for most every school in our county. I've been reading that this is also a concern in other sectors, in healthcare and business and other places. There are some reasons that we're observing about this. We are finding in some cases that our workforce has moved out of the Bay Area. We've also experienced some early retirements where staff have indicated that they retired earlier than they expected to. They maybe were planning to work a few more years, but for whatever reason, maybe related to COVID or other factors, they've already retired. And so those unanticipated early retirements are contributing to the shortage. It is a concern we've been addressing for a while. Our office has been actively recruiting teachers, school nurses, and classified staff on behalf of our school districts. We also offer a number of programs to help people who may be interested in working in the field of education to transition from other careers into the workforce. We have a program called EPIC, which is one of the many programs we're quite proud of, but this program in particular helps train educators, special educators, to work in our schools with a particular emphasis on inclusive practices for students with disabilities. It's an accredited program that allows teachers to obtain their special education credential. We also have the LEAP program, which allows us to support credentialed staff in pursuing an administrative service credential. So we talk a lot about the shortages in our school sites. We also have shortages in the administrative team. I will just share that with the staff shortages, it's meant that many of our principals, superintendents, central office staff are on the ground at school sites, supervising lunch periods and bus drop off and doing all kinds of things to keep our schools running. And there's quite an intense need for school nurses. We have a campaign running right now where we're trying to recruit school nurses. And there's more information about that on our website, but we have a number of vacancies for school nurses. It's a very rewarding role and position, and we hope that more people will consider serving our schools as nurses. And lastly, I want to put in a plug for substitutes. As I mentioned, all those needs that are compounding in the shortage, we need more substitutes and really encourage those in our community who would like to help the schools consider to serve as a substitute in a variety of roles, don't have to be in the classroom. And there's a lot of flexibility when you're a substitute. You could work, one day a week, one day a month. But we really do need some support. We want to preserve in-person instruction and keep that continuity of learning going for our students.
Mm, gotcha. And to follow up on all the questions about COVID-19 so far, do you think that we can potentially go back to distant learning this year in our schools?
When at the beginning of the pandemic, we were in a very unprecedented moment where we really didn't know what we were facing. And we were also in the phase of the pandemic where we were trying to stop the spread. And then we experienced surges in infection and hospitalization rates that were very significant. due to the increased exposure. This year, we have an available, accessible vaccine. We see very low hospitalization rates. We know a lot more about how to have risk measures in place. And so all of this is very promising. And if we continue to use our risk reduction measures, if we continue to utilize the vaccination, routine testing, and universal masking, I think we're going to be able to manage COVID-19 in a way that would prevent the types of surges and the types of hospitalization rates that led to remote learning last year. I also think that we all learned a lot as a community about the important role of schools, and I think there's a very strong commitment to keep our schools open to in-person instruction, while also allowing families to make decisions that are best for them. So I don't anticipate a return to distance learning in Santa Clara County schools based upon what we know so far. And I do think we will see situations where individuals or groups of students might be required to isolate or quarantine, and remote learning may benefit them. To afford some level of continuity, short-term independent study and other learning resources will be available to students during that time.
Mhm.
And some families may also choose independent study as their preferred option. But generally, I don't anticipate a return to distance learning.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So these, speaking of distant learning, these past 18 months have been very challenging for students to keep up and stay on track academically with distant learning. What are schools are doing to make sure that students get caught up now that we're back in person?
Some individuals have referred to this period of time by observing that there may have been some learning loss. And I think that the way that we are seeing this, and the way that our teachers and even many parents are observing, is that really children have some learning gaps. Learning was happening during the remote learning and distance learning time period, but are certainly some gaps. And there are also some impacts from the pandemic that we're seeing show up in our students, some fears, anxieties, some trauma that they may have experienced that may also be impacting their learning. So there are really several approaches that schools are taking to help students address their learning gaps and to support in-person learning. One of those is a big emphasis on welcoming and inclusive school campuses, addressing social emotional learning, and providing supports, mental health and wellness supports, increasing those types of positive things on school campuses to create the conditions where learning is more possible and where young people can benefit from the academic supports being provided. In addition to the robust academic programs that schools are offering, they are also providing before and after school supports, expanded learning, some tutoring, enrichment programs. And there was quite a bit of that was offered this summer as well. One of the things that we shared with families was, really for learning to occur, learning is really social. So we want young people to be able to benefit from the social aspects of learning that can happen on school campuses. We also want learning to be fun. So doing some enrichment activities and providing ways for children to learn outdoors with hands-on materials, with games and other things after school in the summer and during the learning breaks will go a long way to helping students catch up.
Yeah, it is definitely going to be challenging, I'm sure, to get kids. Some of them never been in schools either, right? Um, we've read about some kids in East San Jose not having access to the internet and doing their homework in their fast food parking lot. What are our school districts are doing to bridge the digital divide and ensure that Wi-Fi access to all students in the county?
Well, digital equity is a major concern of the County Office of Education. Many leaders in our community across the state and across the country. And I too saw that image of young people outside the fast food restaurant just trying to do their homework And that scenario played out all across our community. Schools in Santa Clara County, our school districts, and with the support and partnership of the County Board of Supervisors, philanthropy, the City of San Jose, and many other partners, took numerous steps to help address digital equity during the pandemic, and much of that is continuing into this school year and beyond. We are closing the gap to access and inclusion to the internet by providing hotspots, investing in infrastructure, providing devices, providing support such as digital literacy and digital security, helping our families understand how to keep themselves and their children safe while navigating the internet. The county office partnered with local government, philanthropic foundations, community-based organizations, businesses, and internet service providers to raise over $14 million in in-kind goods and funds to purchase and distribute the computing devices, the hotspots, and to pay for internet service to students. We also helped families sign up for broadband internet offers, very low cost offers that could help provide robust internet access in their home, not just during the school day, but after school and beyond.
Mhm.
And this effort has expanded beyond the education sector. And I really think it's important to recognize this isn't just an education issue. Access to the internet is largely needed in the same way that electricity and water are needed for our health and safety, mental health and wellness, access to telehealth and telecounseling, for example. Our effort has also expanded beyond the education sector with the development of some fiber optic middle mile networks that our office is implementing. And we're also working with the support of some of our Board of Supervisors, including Susan Ellenberg, to implement a CBRS platform, which is providing some internet connectivity via the school campus into children's homes that live near the community. So much underway there, and a lot of work that we all need to do together to continue to address digital equity. And just another plug that I believe internet is essential as electricity and water is for our children and families.
Yeah. Um, so this next questions is going to also address some of the questions in our Q&A right now. Um, I know that a lot of people are divided on the issue of police on school campuses. What are your thoughts on this issue? And there's also a question from the Q&A saying that asking what is your commitment to reimagine safety for all of our students and dismantling the school to prison pipeline for our most vulnerable students?
The health and safety of our students on school campuses is our number one priority. And I think that our belief is that the best way for students to be safe on campus is to increase the supports on campus that make our schools as welcoming and belonging as possible and inclusive. Many of the efforts that are underway include things like restorative practices, increasing the number of counselors and social workers that are available on school campuses, creating student-led and co-created student groups, having before and after school activities that support young people um, in their community so that they have more activities and more opportunities to develop their talents and skills. We also believe that there's a lot of important connection when young people have at least one caring adult that they know on the school campus. And a lot of effort needs to be placed to ensure that that is true for every young person in our schools.
Do you think police has a place on campus?
I think that the only time that police may need to be on school campuses is if they're responding to, an emergency or they're called to a campus. I think it's the role of schools and administration to support the activities on school campus. And police aren't there. When police are invited onto our school campus, they aren't there to police our students. They would be there to do the work that police need to do in terms of our school campus safety if there's an intruder or some other emergency that requires the school or the school community to call for the support of the police officer. But our schools, should be investing in all kinds of measures to have safety on school campuses, including all those restorative practices I mentioned earlier.
Mhm. This is another question from the Q&A. If a child in a classroom tests positive for COVID, what is the protocol for that classroom and school for classmates, teachers, staff, and other rooms?
Well, the county and the state have developed what we call a decision tree. And so it isn't a one answer. So what typically would happen is that the student who tests positive would be quarantined. And then we would go about identifying who all the close contacts of that positive case are. And they would also have some level of quarantine based on the decision tree.
Another question from our Q&A. How many children under 12 in our schools have tested positive for COVID-19, and does the county track the situation?
The county office does not track the number of students who test positive in our schools. That information is reported into the state's portal called SPOT, and that information then is utilized to identify who the positive cases are. Each individual district typically has what we call the COVID-19 dashboard on their website, and that website then will tell you how many positive cases, both of students and of staff, have been identified on school campuses.
Are the dashboards available for all school districts in Santa Clara County?
It's my understanding that every school district has posted their own COVID-19 dashboard on their website.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Another question here. What kind of volunteer opportunities are there for non-parent, senior age community members who might want to help out, but not necessarily in classrooms? What is the process for volunteering?
That's a really wonderful question, especially this year when we are still just adjusting to return to in-person instruction. As I mentioned earlier, there are quite a big need for substitutes, and not all the substitute positions are in the classroom positions. They could be substituting in, central office or supporting at meals or supervision of recess or other breaks, all kinds of jobs that, are needed on school campuses. We have very limited and quite restrictive protocols around visitors and volunteers at this time. So many restrictions due to COVID-19. We are limiting the number of non-essential personnel on school campuses. As we learn more and we see how the school year goes, I think more schools will be ready to return and having more volunteers on campus.
Thank you. Here's the question that I would like to also combine with the question from the Q&A. You have written several columns and op-eds for the San Jose Spotlight, highlighting the importance of early childhood education and care. Why are you so passionate about this issue, or why is it vital to student success? And the question from the audience is, can you share more about this impact of expansion of TK in the next 5 years? And they say that this is a very exciting opportunity for education.
It is a very exciting opportunity to see what the state and potential federal investment is going to be for 0 to 5. Um, I am very passionate about expansion of early care and education. and in particular, this universal access at TK, which is going to allow all 4-year-olds to be enrolled in a quality early learning program, regardless of income. So truly universal access. We know that 90% of a child's brain develops by the age of 5. And we also know that through all of our kindergarten readiness assessments that we've done over the years, as well as over 30 years of research, that when young children have opportunities to engage in quality early learning opportunities, including quality childcare and preschool and TK, that they're more likely to be ready to enter school in kindergarten and first grade. They're more likely to have the socio-emotional strategies that they need to thrive. They're more likely to graduate from high school. They tend to have better health outcomes and more. So there's many reasons why we think this investment in the 0 to 5 years is a great investment. I just want to also note that we are experiencing declining birth rates around the globe, in California, and specifically in Santa Clara County as well. And I think we have an obligation to each and every one of the children in our community to give them the best start possible. And that best start includes access to early care and education during the 0 to 5 years.
Mhm. Um, Here is another question that, so I understand the county is also receiving a state grant for youth mental health services in schools. Do you feel like this will be a game changer in addressing mental health in our youth? And I believe there's also a question related to that from the audience. Um, the audience asks, can you be more specific about the social emotional support that you're offering on your campuses? How many new social workers or school counselors have you hired, and other supports you're offering culturally sensitive? What is the ratio of mental health workers versus students on each of your campus?
I want to mention again on the transitional kindergarten about that being a game changer and as well, and some of the impacts that it's going to have. If we're able to serve within the next few years, all 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds as part of TK and kindergarten, we're going to have this incredible opportunity to expand access for 3-year-olds to preschool, and in particular, possibly 2-year-olds. Um, this the mental health and wellness supports are also a part of the 0 to 5 continuum. When we see that preschool programs can provide, those right behavioral supports, really working with parents and helping children in their development, we see that that is also has a preventative impact for our children and families. The new grants and funding opportunities that we're seeing at the state level are to provide more mental health and wellness supports really from those early years, the 0 to 5 years, and into TK through grade 12. This includes increased funding for school-based behavioral health supports, which includes providing more staff on school campuses, such as counselors, social workers, behavioral health coaches, other liaison type personnel, as well as leveraging more community-based organizations and other partners to work in schools. I think one of the most exciting things about the state's efforts is that it's a true commitment to look at schools as centers of wellness. There are many dollars yet to be known exactly how they're going to be rolled out, but there are many dollars contemplated in the state budget that will bring more funds to school districts specifically, as well as more dollars into county behavioral health services departments with this targeted approach at providing resources into schools. There aren't enough school counselors, social workers, master's level personnel to serve all the schools that we believe that we need. And yet, we do know that with a tiered approach, we can meet the needs of our students and our families by having a variety of school personnel on school campuses. And that could include these other types of positions, liaisons, or other types of counseling style positions that really are more able to work on the ground with those prevention and early intervention supports. Another very important part of this initiative has been our opportunity to engage with youth and hear from them about what they want to see in their schools. We have a youth advisory group that has been meeting over the course of this last year or so, funded by the grant that you mentioned. And these young people are quite inspirational. They're telling us that the kinds of things they want to see in their schools include more arts, access to ways to express themselves, arts therapy. They like to see telehealth and telecounseling available at their school. They want more wellness centers. We are opening quite a few this year. A number of our districts expanded their wellness centers this year to increase this social emotional support. They're also telling us that they have some interest in animal therapy, meditation, yoga, um, learning ways to manage their anxiety and their stress, and to have peer run groups, groups that they decide that they feel that they need on their school campuses. And then with some training and support, they can manage these groups with their peers. So a lot of exciting and I think quite implementable recommendations coming from our young people. In regards to the wellness centers, we are seeing that the wellness centers offer a place-based strategy to implement some of these recommendations that students are asking about. In addition, our staff, our students, and families have said we really need more training. We want our teachers to be able to recognize, for example, when a student might be in crisis and unable to communicate that. So, mental health first aid training, for example, is one of the types of trainings that we are working to ensure every single teacher and all school personnel who work with students can have access to that training. Suicide prevention is another. Trauma informed practices and restorative practices, including healing circles, are some other areas of training that we're working to roll out. And some of those efforts speak to the question about, are these supports culturally sensitive, culturally competent, and language rich as well. And I would say that we're all recognizing the need to do that and taking every step possible to ensure that we have culturally competent and diverse providers, and that we're working with our community-based organizations and other partners who may be skilled in that area to supplement what the schools can do.
Well, thank you for that answer. We are almost at time now, and I want to leave you with one last question. What is your biggest takeaway from being the superintendent of one of the largest and most diverse county school system in California?
Well, I'm really grateful and humbled to be a part of an organization that serves students as our priority and to be in a position to represent and give voice to those that don't always have it. As county superintendent of school, for example, we serve the most vulnerable students in our community, including students who may have the most severe disabilities, students who may be in the foster care system or experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness, or be engaged in our justice system. And so it's very important to me, and a takeaway that I have is this immense responsibility to really have the systems that can meet the most vulnerable needs of our students. Another takeaway for me is that as I lead this county, it's an incredible opportunity to move us all in the same direction towards this big vision of Santa Clara County being a place where all children can learn, can thrive, and can stay. It's really important to me that the work that we do leads to young people being able to work and live and succeed in Santa Clara County, in the county that they are growing up in. And I think another takeaway for me is that none of this work can be done alone. Partnerships are essential to our success. And I have been really honored and grateful for the opportunity to partner with so many organizations, partners in philanthropy, with our elected officials and others who join me in prioritizing the health and well-being of our youth and are excited to contribute to their long-term success.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. I think that wraps up our discussion today. And thank you again for our guest, Superintendent Dr. Marianne Dewan. A video recording of today's webinar will be available on San Jose Spotlight website next week. To follow our coverage and to learn more of how to support nonprofit journalism and programming like this, please visit our website, sanjosespotlight.com. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you again in a future event. Dr. Dewan, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you very much.